Asterisk. Be careful what you think about, because your mind may be building a future you never asked for. Every time you say, asterisk, I can't, something inside you listens. Every time you expect failure, you prepare yourself to avoid success. And every time you repeat the same story about who you are, you make that story harder to escape. The frightening part. You may already be becoming exactly what you think about most. And once you understand how this happens, you'll never look at your own thoughts the same way again. Be careful what you think about, because your mind may be quietly building a future you never asked for. Every day, you have thousands of thoughts. Most disappear, but some stay. You repeat them in the morning. You carry them into your work. You hear them when you're alone. And eventually, those thoughts begin influencing the decisions you make without you even noticing. A person thinks, I'm not good enough. Then an opportunity appears. They hesitate. Someone else takes it. Later, they say, I guess it wasn't meant for me. But maybe it wasn't fate. Maybe it was a belief. That's the dangerous part. Your thoughts don't need to control you directly. They only need to influence your next decision. One small decision becomes another, then another. And after enough repetition, your behavior starts looking like your personality. You say, I'm just not confident. But perhaps you've simply practiced avoiding situations that require confidence. You say, I'm not disciplined. But perhaps you've practiced choosing comfort whenever discomfort appears. You say, I'm unlucky. But perhaps you've trained yourself to notice every disappointment while ignoring every possibility. And here's where things get uncomfortable. Your mind is constantly searching for evidence that your beliefs are true. If you believe nobody respects you, you'll notice the person who ignores you. If you believe you're capable, you'll notice the chance hidden inside the same problem. The situation may be identical. Your interpretation changes, and your interpretation influences what you do next. Think about walking through a crowded airport. Hundreds of conversations surround you. Announcements echo overhead. People rush past, yet you barely notice most of it. Then someone says your name. Instantly, your attention changes. The sound was always there. You simply weren't looking for it. Your mind does this with your life. If you've trained yourself to search for rejection, you'll find reasons to stay silent. If you've trained yourself to search for opportunity, you'll begin noticing doors you once walked past. That's why changing your life doesn't always begin with changing your circumstances. Sometimes it begins with changing the question inside your head. Instead of asking, why does this always happen to me? Ask, what can I do with what happened? Instead of, what if I fail? Ask, what could I learn if I tried? That doesn't guarantee success. It creates movement. And movement matters, because confidence rarely arrives before action. It usually comes after evidence. You take one uncomfortable step. You survive it. Your mind remembers. You take another. And slowly something changes. You begin trusting yourself. That is where real confidence starts. Not with believing you'll always win, but with knowing you'll be able to handle losing. And there's something even deeper. Some of the thoughts controlling you today may not have started with you. A teacher may have made you feel incapable. A failure may have made you afraid to try again. Someone's rejection may have made you question your worth. Years later, the event is forgotten, but the belief remains. You call it personality. You call it reality. You call it just who I am. But a belief being familiar doesn't make it true. And the moment you understand that, you create your first opportunity for change, because you don't have to believe every thought that enters your mind. You can question it, you can challenge it, and most importantly, you can choose what happens next. But your old identity won't surrender that easily, and that's where the real battle begins. Your old identity has a strange way of defending itself. The moment you try to change, it reminds you who you used to be. You decide to wake up earlier. Suddenly, your mind says, you can start tomorrow. You decide to speak up. It whispers, don't embarrass yourself. You decide to take a serious risk. It asks, what if you fail? The voice sounds reasonable. That's what makes it powerful. But here's what most people don't understand. Familiar doesn't mean safe. Sometimes the life you're desperately trying to escape feels comfortable simply because you've lived inside it for so long. A person can become comfortable with procrastination, comfortable with self-doubt, comfortable with making excuses, even comfortable with being unhappy. Not because they enjoy suffering, because the unknown feels more frightening than the familiar. That's why transformation often feels uncomfortable at first. You're not only changing your habits, You're challenging an identity. Imagine someone who has spent 10 years avoiding difficult conversations. One day, they finally decide to speak honestly. Their heart starts racing. Their mind says, don't do this. They almost walk away. But they stay. They speak. The conversation isn't perfect. Maybe the other person disagrees. Maybe things become uncomfortable. But afterwards, something important has happened. They have evidence. I can handle difficult conversations. That evidence is more powerful than motivation, because your identity changes when your brain repeatedly sees proof that you can behave differently. This is why small victories matter. Getting out of bed when you said you would, finishing something you wanted to abandon, putting your phone away when you need to focus, keeping a promise nobody else knows about. These actions may look insignificant, but internally they are sending a message. I can trust myself, and self-trust is the foundation of real confidence. You don't become confident because someone tells you that you're amazing. You become confident because you repeatedly prove to yourself that you can handle life. And this changes the way you see failure. If your identity depends on always succeeding, failure becomes terrifying. But if your identity is built around learning, failure becomes information. You lose an opportunity. You learn, you make a mistake, you adjust, you get rejected, you improve, you fall behind, you continue. The event doesn't have to become your identity. It can become your training. But there is another force that quietly destroys this process: comparison. You open your phone and see someone your age buying a house, someone launching a business, someone traveling the world, someone looking confident, successful, and completely certain about their future. Suddenly, your own progress feels small, but you're comparing your unfinished story to someone else's highlight. You don't see their failures. You don't see their doubts. You don't see the years nobody applauded, and comparison can make you abandon a life that was never meant to be yours. That's why purpose matters. You don't need to know exactly where you'll be 10 years from now. You need to know who you're trying to become. More disciplined, more courageous, more focused, more reliable, more peaceful. Once you know the person you're becoming, your choices become clearer. Instead of asking, what do I feel like doing? Ask, what would the person I'm becoming do next? That question can change an ordinary day, and enough changed days can change an entire life. But knowing who you want to become is only the beginning. The next challenge is learning how to turn that identity into daily action. You don't need to control every thought. You only need to stop allowing every thought to control you. Fear will appear. Doubt will appear. Old memories will return. That doesn't mean you failed. It means you're human. The goal isn't to create a mind where negative thoughts never exist. The goal is to decide which thoughts deserve your belief. Start paying attention to the sentences you repeat when nobody is listening. I'm behind. I'm not good enough. I always mess things up. I don't have enough time. I'm just not disciplined. Then stop and ask, asterisk, is this a fact, or is this a story I've practiced? That question creates distance, and distance gives you a choice. You can notice a thought without obeying it. You can feel fear without allowing fear to make the decision. You can doubt yourself and still take the next step. And that next step is where transformation becomes real. Don't try to rebuild your entire life tomorrow. Choose one action. Wake up when you said you would. Finish the task. Take the walk. Make the call. Start the project. Write the first page. Keep one promise to yourself. Then do it again tomorrow, because your identity is built through evidence. Every promise you keep tells your mind, this is who I am. Every difficult action you complete tells your mind, I can handle this. Every time you choose discipline over comfort, you become slightly different. At first, nobody notices. Maybe even you don't notice. But months later, the difference becomes impossible to ignore. The person who once avoided difficult conversations starts speaking honestly. The person who constantly procrastinated starts finishing things. The person who feared rejection begins taking chances. The person who constantly doubted themselves begins trusting their decisions. It didn't happen in one dramatic moment. It happened through hundreds of ordinary choices. And that's why you should never underestimate an ordinary day. One ordinary day can reinforce your old identity, or it can become evidence for a new one. But you will still have bad days. You will lose discipline. You will make mistakes. You will return to old habits. Don't turn one bad day into a permanent identity. If you miss one workout, return tomorrow. If you waste the morning, don't waste the entire day. If you make a bad decision, make the next one better. A mistake is something you did. It isn't who you are. Fear is something you feel. It isn't who you are. Failure is something you experienced. It isn't who you are. Be especially careful with the words that follow. I am lazy. I am weak. I am unlucky. I am a failure. Those words can become instructions. Instead, describe the behavior. I've been procrastinating. I've struggled with discipline. I've been avoiding difficult things. Now there is room for change. And room for change is where your future begins. So think about the person you want to become. Not only what they have, think about how they behave, how they respond under pressure, how they speak to themselves, what they refuse to tolerate, what they do when nobody is watching. Then ask yourself one question. What would that person do today? Not someday. Today, because your future self isn't created 5 years from now. Your future self is being created by what you repeatedly do right now. So be careful what you think about, because thoughts become beliefs, beliefs influence choices. Choices become habits, habits shape identity, and identity influences the life you build. You don't need to change everything tonight. Chant one thought, then one decision, then one action, repeat. One day you'll look back and realize your life didn't suddenly change. You changed first, one thought at a time.